Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hope you guys can hear me and my microphone is working. Always takes a few seconds before I can tell. Looks like it is. Cool. We are on day 33. Um, and let's jump straight into it, shall we? Exodus 10 to 12, the last couple, last three plagues, and the final liberation of Israel. Um, yeah, let's get into it. So, Uh, we carry on with Pharaoh, you know, seeing the seeing the devastation that the plagues are causing, releasing them, and then changing his mind. And in Exodus 10, we've got another plague, which is a plague of locusts. Um, just to remind us, the Egyptians had a god of agriculture, a god of fertility of the land, and a god of harvest, all of which were challenged when locusts came upon the land, and they couldn't stop anything. And the locusts destroyed what was left of whatever crops and trees they had after the hail had destroyed everything else. So yeah, they just continue to hold L's, aren't they? Um, Moses and Aaron go back, and when when they're told about the locust, their officials actually come and then speak to Pharaoh, and I'm like, "How long are you going to let this continue? Egypt is in ruins." And so Pharaoh, acquiesces and says, "Okay, who's going to go with you?" And they're like, "We're all going to go, young and old, with our flocks and our herds," and that's what snaps. Pharaoh crashes out over that, um, and says, "No, it's just the men that are gonna go." And Moses is like, "Okay, cool. Then here's the locust. They come, they destroy everything." As I said, they attack that aspect of their pantheon: Osiris, Hathor, Renin, um, and Pharaoh. He says, "I've sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Um, so go." And the Lord responded by removing the locust. Now, one thing I want to point out here is how God does it, right? So God says there will be locusts and causes winds to bring locusts. I believe God could very well have just, manifested the locusts, but he chose to do it through bringing winds to bring them from another place, and he uses winds to take them away. Um, And I think there's something there where God is also showing that He commands nature. He doesn't. He doesn't want to, or he chooses not to sort of magically conjure up locusts. And it's like, oh, where did these locusts come from? Okay, they are just divine locusts that the God of Israel, produced. That would have been equally as, well, I don't know, equally, but that would have been just as devastating, just as crazy. And yet he chose to command the winds to bring locusts in and then use the winds to like turn them away, which again, to me, is further proving. And he says as much that all of this, he's hardened Pharaoh's hearts such that he can perform these miracles against them so that they know and Israel knows that he is God. And in choosing to do it this way, using nature itself to bring in the locust, to bring in the plague, I think he's further bolstering that point that he is the Lord. He controls nature in and of itself. Um, so he carries on, and Pharaoh again refused to let the people go. So this time he brings darkness, and he brings a darkness that's so thick they can actually feel it. Um, I don't even know how to describe this, but it was significant enough that they couldn't see each other, and thus no one moved for 3 days while there was light in Israel. Sorry, I'm super tired. whilst there was light in Israel, which is crazy. Um, Again, this attacks Ra, who was the supreme sun god, so the literally the Odin of the Egyptian pantheon. He is the sun god, and there's darkness. As the sun god died, Capri, god of the morning sun, Aten, the sun disk deity, so the sun itself, and Horus, who's often associated with the sun. Um, all of these gods could not stop the God of Israel from bringing a darkness that was palpable upon Egypt. And again, it's like a it's like a complete theological destruction. All of their gods, all of their pantheon is challenged from the least now to Ra. And that wasn't enough. It says the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart once more. Now, the other thing about the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart, I was thinking about this, and I think about what Pastor Lyle said yesterday regarding that Pharaoh's heart was already hardened. And again, I'm seeing two things happening at the same time that are not mutually exclusive, right? God says a thing, prophesies a thing, dictates a thing to happen, but then we are now human nature also have our part to play. That's not necessarily puppeted by God, but rather used, I think, by God to achieve his own aims. Now, I think Pharaoh, we've got to think of what type of person this Pharaoh was, right? Um, the Israelites had been living there. Remember, the Israelites came to live there under the happiest of circumstances, right? The famine, um, for 7 years that affected effectively, the whole, as far as they're concerned, world had been survived, thrived maybe by Joseph, this Hebrew boy who interpreted the dreams that Pharaoh's had with. I'm sorry, guys, this is real life and time. Who interpreted the dreams that Pharaoh was having, and who made arrangements such that they could survive it and saved countless lives. His family are reunited after a long time. They come into Egypt. The Pharaoh promises to give them the best of the land. They get the best of the land. 70 people, I believe it was, 70 people that came to live in Egypt at that time. And they've now grown to what we will find to be 600,000 men, not counting women and children. So they've grown, yes. But this is a pharaoh who's following in the line. I don't remember if he decided this himself. I think it is him. Mm. But then Moses had run away, and so he must have died at least, and then another pharaoh taken his place. But he's carrying on in a lineage where they have enslaved his people for no other reason than because they are growing powerful, because they are many. So he's enslaved them, and it wasn't a reasonable slavery. It wasn't a comfortable slavery. They were suffering. They were crying out to their Lord because of their suffering. So this is a Pharaoh who's already not necessarily nice. It's also a Pharaoh who, when they first said, "Let us go," decided that his best course of action was to reduce or no longer provide them straw and require for them to meet the same quota. So he's already showing to be a wicked man, is my point. I think all God did was actually sustain him in his wickedness. The Lord hardened his heart, but it seemed the Lord just bolstered him in what he already was going to do and what he already felt in his wickedness. And so, with all of these plagues, with, as the official said, Egypt in ruins, he in his wickedness, bolstered by the Lord supernaturally, is able to just turn a blind eye to it and be like, I'm not going to let you guys go. And I think that's crazy. Um, all right. So in Exodus 11, we finally have that final blow. God's going to strike the firstborn sons of everyone in Egypt. He's going to cause his angel of death to pass through, and the firstborn son of everyone, from Pharaoh to the servant girl, from the livestock, all the firstborn sons are going to be killed. They're going to die. Is this wicked? It's a plague. Yeah, it's painful and it's wicked. It's a punishment, though. And it's a punishment that, for all intents and purposes, Egyptians probably deserved. Um, Now, I won't sit here and say anyone deserves to have their firstborn son killed. I think that's harsh, but I think it's it's a plague that God brought upon Egypt after years of their tormenting Israel. Should the firstborn sons die for that? I can't justify that in any sort of secular way other than to say God creates and God takes away. Right? God is God. But then also with this particular plague, there was a way out. Now, if the plague of hail was one thing, when hail was coming, they were told, "Get out, and you'll be okay." When this plague is coming, they're also told, well, they know that the Israelites will not suffer it. I have a feeling from the description that if any of the Egyptians had gone into the Israelite house, they would also be saved. They would, if they were covered by the blood, as it were, pun intended, because it's not even a pun. There was blood on the doorpost. That they'd be secure. Their firstborn sons would be fine. Obviously, they weren't going to do that. They didn't do that, and there was a mighty cry in Egypt that night. But at the same time, God institutes this Passover feast, right? In Exodus 12, and whilst all of that is about to happen, the Israelites are actually preparing a meal with an animal, and they're using the blood of the animal on the doorpost, and that's a sign for the angel of death to not go in to pass over. But they're eating their bread, not made with yeast, and their meat ready to go. They're suited, they're booted, they're ready to go. And this is to become a festival amongst the people to always remind them, such that, years and years and years later, when the kids ask, why do we do this particular thing? Why do we just up as though we're going to head out on the road, eat bread without yeast in it, as though we didn't have time to prepare the bread properly, um, and eat this meat and do this whole thing with the blood? And they're to tell their kids this is what it was like when we were about to be released from Egypt. And so carry on a tradition that marks this momentous occasion. Um, and it's a powerful image because we, I imagine, generations after, when they get dressed and they're wearing their sandals and they're eating this hastily made bread, that they can relate somewhat to what their ancestors went through. They can identify with what their ancestors went through. And with that, identify with the God of their ancestors that brought them through with such a mighty hand. And so, Exodus 12 is that. And at midnight, all the firstborn sons are killed. Pharaoh and his officials, they called for Moses and kicked them out. And God had told Moses to tell the Israelites that when they're about to get kicked out, they should ask the Egyptians for, clothes and the supplies and money. And the Egyptians looked favorably upon them. I imagine in effort to quickly get them out, gave them everything they asked, and in doing so, there was a transfer of wealth from the Egyptians to the Israelites, who had more than likely earned that with the years and years of servitude that they had done. So they're free, they've got reparations, and they're literally being kicked out of Egypt, out of the land of their slavery. God is fulfilling this promise that He made to Abraham years and years and years ago. After 430 years of captivity, slavery, they are out, and that's where we leave. Yeah, that's where we end things today. Next, tomorrow's reading is Exodus 13 to 15. And we will carry on because the saga isn't quite just yet done. So I am hoping that this is encouraging you to pick up your word and give it a study. It's these are some of the more exciting bits, maybe, where we see the tales that we have long heard. But I hope that God's also showing us and giving us a deeper understanding of the intent behind His interactions with His people and what we're supposed to take from it, reading it so many thousands of years on this side of history. Cool. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Whenever you're watching this, thank you for doing so. And I will catch you, God willing, tomorrow. Peace out.